Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Buildings Week. My name is Nate, and I'm excited to give you guys a run through and a demo today of one of Autodesk products called Assemble Systems. So, like I said, a little bit more about myself here. I'm a product specialist for Autodesk Construction Solutions. I grew up in Vermont, and I went to the University of Vermont, graduating with an engineering degree, focusing in civil and structures. Shortly after graduation, I joined a pretty cool little startup called Assemble Systems. From there, I went on to lead the engineering team at Assemble, where we got acquired by Autodesk. And the rest is really history. But during that time at Autodesk, I had tons of opportunities to begin working with BIM and workflows and really watch Assemble flourish into the product that is today. And really excited to kind of get into all the different things Assemble can provide for a general contractor, for a subcontractor, or even an owner in a design team. So a little bit, just like I said, a little bit more about myself. I have a big passion for sustainability. I really like to tie the BIM and the BIM and construction technology and construction all together when it comes to sustainable practices. And if I'm not working or watching sports or golfing or something, I'm probably out taking pictures. Definitely, you'll find me with my camera, particularly when I'm traveling for work and whatnot. But like I said, let's get into Assemble here, and excited to give you guys a full-blown demo. So I'd like to start with this slide because I think setting the stage for why a tool like this is important is really a good starting point. So construction is the most collaborative yet fragmented industry in the world. When you look at a construction process, there's at least 5 stakeholders, I'd say, at a time, and that's each stakeholder. When I say stakeholder, I'm talking organizations. And then within those organizations, there's teams and teams and teams, all of which need to work cohesively just to deliver the project on schedule and on budget. So because we're so fragmented and manual, we struggle to be successful when it comes to delivering things on time. I think I saw a statistic that at least that 90% of projects are 10% past their schedule at a minimum. And so what are the ways that we can become more collaborative and less fragmented? And I think the main way through that is technology. And that brings me to my next slide, which is the digitization index from the McKinsey Global Institute. And you'll very sadly see construction right at the bottom next to agriculture and hunting. So being a guy who grew up in Vermont and is familiar with agriculture and hunting, the fact that construction is even in the conversation around those industries is kind of almost laughable. And so through tools like ours and through Autodesk's tools, well outside of just Assemble, we look to very much bring that digitization index up to the top percentage, at least get it above half, so that we're much more adoptive of technology and allow technology to take some of that heavy lifting that allows us to, or has us be off schedule or over budget. So as we get into Assemble specifically, we look at estimating department challenges and why, once again, why is a tool like this important? We look at the challenges that an estimating team generally sees. Tight deadlines, limited resources. A big one is a lack of BIM expertise. Without VDC teams and without a tool like Assemble, it's really impossible for an estimator to really delve into the BIM side of things. And on top of that, they lack a constructible model a lot of times. Design teams still are modeling things so they look pretty in 2D. But when it comes to the actual use of that model downstream, until we see a shift back towards 3D from a contractual perspective, that lack of constructible models just continue to happen time and time again. All of these things really lead to working in silos, and then all of those different things are fed and only exacerbated by multiple design iterations, high owner expectations, constraints on the budget and scheduling, and maybe even BIM requirements. So how can Assemble help with these things? And we'll get into this a lot more as we go, but we can drastically reduce takeoff time, allow you to allocate your time to what actually matters most. Everyone's able to add data to the process. So even that lack of constructible model can be brought to a higher level by using a tool like ours to embed information and condition the model forward. You even see here increased teamwork between VDC and estimators, and sometimes that isn't even possible. So the ability for the estimator to take control of some of this stuff to actually get that greater use and actual value of BIM is really, really helpful. VDC suffers from some similar challenges, limited resources. They're now responsible for feeding a lot of this stuff to the estimating team. And you see a lot of the things are reflected here are kind of the opposite of what we saw in the last slide, where the lack of BIM expertise in other departments. So now VDC is really responsible for providing the insights that BIM gives to the rest of the teams. So how does Assemble help these teams? And it's really, we're all kind of really helping everyone all at the same time with a very similar set of functionality, but we're extending the model data to key stakeholders like those estimators, allowing that work to be not specifically done by the VDC team, but able to be taken control of by other departments who can get the information for themselves. But now the VDC teams can really help they can really help facilitate that use of BIM and technology as they can condition and they can get the model ready, pushing it out to Assemble so that the estimating team can reap the benefits. So why Assemble? I mean, the first and foremost is instant access to BIM data for pre-construction and construction workflows. We're really enabling teams to condition, query, and connect BIM data to key workflows like design review, quantity takeoff, push that to estimating, change order, and quantity management as designs update, but even things like value engineering and reducing risk throughout the construction process as we get to planning and execution. A couple of the other things that we do is really, like I said, it's really driven by BIM data and quantity management. But when you talk about data, data can be just about anything. Data can be quantities, it can be statuses, it can be updates. So when we look at the different workflows and things that we support, change analysis, we'll get into it as we go, but a lot of time is spent updating budgets, and we're able to quickly and easily contrast those models against one another. Models are immediately quantified as they get extracted to our tool. Data can be added for project schedule to provide sequencing. And we can take this model and actually slice it and dice it and save it out into these views and different looks at the data set. So 5 different folks can get the 5 different looks at the data that they need to truly understand their project to what's specific to them. But I mean, even things like an integration with BIM 360 to allow this data to even be more connected, but even using this tool to look really good at an interview, whether it's through presentation slides or live demos or even data and analytics, we can really help pretty much the entire construction process and really allow for BIM to act as the repository for all that important information that we're looking to share. So this is my favorite slide, and I think really paints the picture that I'm trying to paint here is there's a huge gap between design and construction, and Assemble really looks to bridge that gap. You look at the design model on the left, kind of speaking one language, and you look at the construction model on the right. And the question is, how do we translate one to the other? And Assemble thinks the way to do that is through model conditioning, through allowing a team as the end user to update and change and add information to these models so that they can take what is generally a lot of times a very good base to start with from the design team. The naming conventions and tags, though, generally don't translate, once again, to what the GC actually needs to work with. So now they can start applying WBS codes, they can start quantifying things, they can start tracking work in place. They can really take that design model, which is meant to produce 2D documents a lot of times, and begin to turn it into that construction model that they find actually useful. So one of my last slides here, I like to kind of outline all the different integrations and all the workflows that we like to support. So we're able to take in data from multiple different design tools, all the industry standards, including the Autodesk AEC suites, Revit, AutoCAD, Civil 3D, from IFC, but also external design tools like MicroStation and CADWorks. All that's fed directly from those authoring tools into Assemble, where it's then able to be conditioned, grouped, sorted, and filtered, and added to. And it really feeds into 3 buckets: quantification and change management around model validation, model comparison. We use integrations with Excel to push directly to your in-house solutions or to your estimating tools. We can apply cost codes, but we're also, like I said, getting instantaneous quantities right out of the box. As we get into work in place tracking, we can collect and report information on site. We can report percentage complete, All of this being done from our iPad app that's leveraging those 3D views that I talked about a little earlier on. And everything updates in real time so that the second somebody makes an update in the field, you see that same information updated not only in your model, but also in any reports that you might be pulling. And third, and the most wide-ranging, is the idea of data management. So this can be done by anybody, whether you're a GC, an owner, an architect, an engineer. You're able to take this model data, update it, change it, work with it, but also synchronize it back into Revit. So you can actually have a data-rich model that you can hand over at the end of a job. We also allow for data templates and assemble properties to add that extra information. But my favorite thing is our Power BI integration. I'm able to push all of these things that we're talking about, all the construction data, into a format that is usable and extremely data forward, and able to create analytics and things that aren't normally looked at in the construction life cycle. So see a few of our integration partners there that really help us drive all these things: BIM 360, the Autodesk Construction Cloud, Power BI, Excel, and even point clouds that we can integrate into the bigger model as well. So that wraps up my slides here. Looking forward to getting into a live demo as we go through the rest of my presentation here. So as we pull up Assemble, we get a first look at this product that I was talking about before, and you can see a few of those things right out of the box beginning to persist on the screen. All of the quantities that are instantaneously quantified, you see, are held in this inventory. You see multiple models over on the left representing different trades and different data sets and different scopes of work. And then you see that 3D model right over here on the right. The first thing I'll call out is I'm completely in the cloud. I'm just in Google Chrome, and I can go do whatever I want here in the web. And this is one of the big differences between Assemble and like conventional like BIM tools. This can go be run on the secretary's desk out front versus the $5,000 computer that your VDC manager has to get along with the week's worth of training on Revit. And for the VDC manager who's using Revit to its fullest extent, that makes sense. But for an estimator, they're not getting half, even a fraction of what Revit provides. So a solution like this is much more suited to those sorts of personnel within the general contractor or the subcontractor. So you'll see every single object in this inventory, and from that model, is going to have its own line item. Each line item is going to be represented in my 3D viewer, where I can look at exactly where that thing exists. We can see its quantity. We can even see how that quantity relates to the overall aggregate for that type of, in this case, ceiling, but also all the ceilings in general. The same interaction occurs from the 3D back to the inventory, where I can select an object out of my 3D viewer, and you see it highlighted throughout my inventory as well. So we do have a really cool functionality as well, bringing in the 2D documents out of Revit. So this is something I really love to show, where we can see we have all the available documents that Revit provided, generally also going to be pretty relevant to your contract documents, even if the architect didn't tell you that's where he got them. But we can come in and see all the available sheets here. But if I go to only the selected, it's only going to pull up the sheets the selected object appears on. So if I hop to that first floor plan, you'll see that the object's actually highlighted out of my 2D sheet. And I have the ability to come in and actually make selections out of my 2D to see that represented across my 3D and my larger data set. So as we go through all these things, the other thing I'll call out is the parameter set on the right, because we're not just extracting quantities, we're extracting every single thing that this model has to offer. So let me just close down and get a little more real estate here on my screen. So going back to just, let's grab that roof. You see it's a generic 2.5-inch roof. That's 698 square meters. And if we pull over to the right-hand side, you'll notice all these other properties cascading down in my right-hand panel. So these are all the other subsequent things that we pull out of the model. This is the true I in BIM, the information that that makes these models so important. And this is one of the big differences too, as you're working with like an AutoCAD model versus a Revit model versus a Tekla model. All of these things hold a different amount of information, but truly is that I in BIM. So you see that we have levels, you see that we have dimensions and areas, we have everything that the model has to offer. And What's really important about all of this stuff is not only can we update some of these things and push them back into Revit, but any and all of these values are able to be used throughout the entire interface, whether it be for grouping, sorting, and filtering, or it be for just classification or visualization. So what really sets us apart here, I think, is not the Revit properties. There are plenty of other tools that can access these Revit properties, but what sets Assemble apart are the Assemble properties. The Assemble properties really are what drive our idea of conditioning. This data that needs to be conditioned, you need to have a place to put that information. And these properties are completely customizable, completely open-ended, that really allow for any information that you need to be added into this data set directly tied back to that model object. You see that we have different things for VE options. We have cost codes that we can define. We have different computations that we might need to do for weight or weight per square foot, or even things that aren't modeled always, like formwork. Maybe that you're able to take the quantities that exist out of the model and calculate formwork so that you are able to actually quantify something that wasn't even modeled out of the box. On top of that, we can start to look at the field applications here as well, where we have installation statuses and responsible subs, even collecting the number of man hours or schedules, start dates and finish dates, so that you can actually contrast the actuals against the schedule. You can very much so have a reflection of the earned value of that job compared to your actual and how the team is actually performing on site. So say we want to get into this a little bit more practically. We've looked at the parameters, we've looked at the model viewer, we've looked at all these different things that Assemble provides. And the idea here is, how do we seamlessly use these things to actually be useful? And so I always like to look at, all right, say I want to take off concrete. Like I said, my background is in civil engineering, so I tend to rely on structures. But where do I start? I wanted to quantify something. How do I get going? And that's one of the first things that anyone asks me is, like, really speaking to that gap between design and construction. Like, Revit defines structural framing, but that framing could be wood, it could be concrete, it could be steel, it could be marble, it could be anything. So as we look into this, we need to take a different view at that data right off the bat. And if I just grab one of these objects and I look at my parameters on the right, all I need to do is find something a little bit more relevant to work with. And in this case, I see there's a structural material that's been defined for these objects here. And maybe not everything has this material, but by taking this step, we're immediately jumping a little bit closer to the estimator's world. And you can see that nothing's been hidden, nothing's been changed other than the way that we're looking and viewing this information. So if I come in, I can select all the things that are defined as concrete. You see that persisting throughout my building. There's some walls, some floors, some foundations. If I want to look at my steel, you can see all my steel framing persisting through. You can even see the steel piles that are built out. So the idea is here that all of these things need to be still kind of classified together. We have the materials, but maybe we need to apply a cost code, or as you see here, I've gone through and applied some packages. So I can come through and I can actually package these things together in a way that relates them effectively. And I'm just using my Assemble parameter of package in here, and I'm calling it steel. And you may have noticed that I did the same thing for concrete. We're able to get a concrete package. You see I must have defined this a couple of different ways because we're seeing multiple values. But you can see now, clearly there's foundations here that are quantified separately from the walls and the floors and the framing. So you can see if I separate these things out, we do have different breakdowns per package. And so not everything is the way that we need it to be out of the box. So adding these pieces of information is really important too. The other thing I'll call out is that we always define what's not assigned. So you can able to come in and actually break these things down, even if they're missing the value that you need. But enough on this point. I think the understanding of assigning these values is probably already understood by any estimator who's ever tried this sort of thing. But let's take that package and use it as a method to organize my data set. So very, very quickly here, we're able to now get a breakdown of all of our concrete. And you notice that it doesn't include all the things that are originally defined as concrete because they weren't supposed to be in the scope of work that I was looking to define, which is an important call out, as you would have been over quantifying things that really didn't need to be quantified as concrete. You can see our steel with a relevant tonnage, but you can also see foundations and all the things that have yet to be quantified too. So what I'll do is I'll probably want to filter this down. If I'm an estimator, I don't really want all of the stuff in one centralized view. I want to be able to say, show me only the bid package of concrete, or show me only, I prefer steel. So with one quick rule I've created here, all of a sudden I've filtered that enormous data set to just my 980 steel sections. And if you notice, that bid package actually has more levels of detail than just the fact that it's all part of a package. If I wanted to take these things away, you'd notice that it's still just a cascade of different information, and it's still really hard to consume. But if I go back into my package and I back in that level that I defined, or the family name out of the model, or the type name, you'll see that when I add these things, it adds quite a bit of intelligence back down to this model. So not only are we seeing the steel, now we're seeing it per level. As we dive into a specific level, you actually see all the section sizes and shapes. And then you get the actual relevant section size as you drill down even further. So we can see, oh, there's 11 and 3/4 tons of steel, of W18 by 35 steel on the first level. And at this point, we're much, much closer to a quantified model than we were when we started. We can now do a couple of things to wrap this up. Maybe I want to apply now some cost codes. I want to come in and say, this is part of my metals, structural metal framing, structural steel framing, structural steel for buildings. Done. Now I've applied my cost code. I can save that out. Maybe I want to visualize this model a little bit more thoroughly using colorizations. I can come in and look at it based on that family name, which calls out the steel section shape. Now I get a really comprehensive visual breakdown too. And all those colors persist as we go through the different things we see on the left. Maybe we need to push this out to our estimate now. I can come in and push this right to an Excel file, which will download directly onto your desktop. And we can even come in and save this as a view. So I can come in and look at the ability to say, all right, this is now my steel by family. And back to that, say, data set that I'm talking about, we're able to come in now and see a home page where we have my steel takeoff or my steel by family and type, all things that I'm able to save and work with time and time again. So the one thing I just remembered that I actually do want to quickly show as I hop into another project here is what happens now after we've done all of this stuff. And I'll hop into a similar steel model over here in my structural project. And you'll notice a very, very small difference about this interface compared to the last. Once it loads up here, you'll see that in my other window, the show changes icon was actually grayed out. And I shouldn't have opened the entire view here. I probably should have leveraged the view that I actually created in the first place, similarly to my other project. But say I want to just see what's updated. I get a new design update. I open up my entire model. What's changed overall? By just selecting that show change icon, you're able to see everything that was added, removed, type changed, quantity changed, or type and quantity changed. You're able to get the before and after quantities for variance, but you're also able to get the specific variance that rolls into these things as well. So now it's extremely easy to highlight and update your budget for what actually does change across those design iterations. And we can ghost in the rest of the model if we need to get a reference of where these things actually live. But now you can update your budget and move on to the next job. So at this point, we've added some information to the model. We've gone back and we've organized it, we've filtered it, we've colorized it, we saved it for later, we saved it for our colleagues. We even exported it to Excel so it can be imported into our full-blown estimate. Then we got a design update. We were able to quantify all of those changes. And my takeoff process goes from what might be a week particularly with the changes, and if you have to re-quantify everything again, to, in this case, how long has this presentation been going? 15 minutes. And so all of a sudden it changes your complete understanding of how we look at these BIM models and how we look at BIM in general. It can take a process that generally is extremely long and shorten it quite a bit, and all of a sudden it's actually a different ideology. It's going from quantification actually to analysis. The workflow is actually shifting a little bit more towards those things. So we've looked through quantification. What happens downstream? We've used this model now for our budget, our estimate. Things are great. We're awarded the job. Now we go to actually fabricate and build these things. This is where Assemble really starts to become flexible, as we've taken a common workflow of quantification, and now we need to look at it a little bit of a different way. Maybe I want to go track now this steel as it gets installed so I can tie back to my budget to make sure we're have a solid earned value. Maybe I want to filter back down to that steel package, which I've defined over here as well. And instead of quantification processes, we're just going to leverage the property over on the right of status. So by grabbing that status now instead of package and making it the breakdown, very quickly I'm able to get an outlook of what's complete, what's hung, what's installed, what's insulated, what hasn't been assigned, what has been not installed, or what's been welded. Maybe I want to make sure I include these not assigned objects in my installation statuses. Maybe these things are actually welded today. You'll notice when I save that, and we take a look at this data set again, go back to bid package, or maybe flip back to steel here, our installation status, you'll see that has actually gone away, and we have that as the part of the bigger data set here. But now we can come in and colorize the model based on those same parameters, just in the same way that we went through and quantified our model for pre-construction and estimating. Now I get an extremely comprehensive look at what's actually happening on site. And from here, I can get all my relevant tonnages, all my relevant quantities, but I can also open up a dashboard. As I mentioned, we directly can integrate with Power BI. And as I open up my Power BI dashboard that's pulling data from this project, instantaneously I'm getting a look at all of these things, but reporting it now. Maybe as the project manager, you care about this view. You really care about exactly how things are going forward. But if you're the owner, you're the project executive, you're the CEO, you really care about this sort of stuff. Where are we at? How much of the budget have we spent? How much can we get paid? How much have we actually finished? If you're a subcontractor, there's the days of working with a GC and having to quarrel over how much work you've completed is done, because you're able to track these things and provide direct insights to where you're at on that job. Not to mention that we can also look at these from a pre-constructed perspective, but we can take a look at these dashboards and look at trends of cost and quantity over time. So you can look at impacts of the design budget to the overall set of information. But mainly we look now at just the complete customization of this data and extending the life cycle of this BIM well past just pre-construction or just like clash and coordination. I think technology, and particularly BIM technology, is really the only way forward when it comes to bringing the construction into the next century. And from my experience, whether it be in the United States with industry leaders or more particularly in Europe, these things are already possible. I work with thousands of GCs across the world, all doing these things already. I see carbon loaded models. I see cost loaded models. I see schedule loaded models. I see estimators using this. I see superintendents opening it up on an iPad. The things I'm talking about here, they're no longer futuristic. I've been giving these presentations for a long time now, particularly around these BIM products. And at one point, it might have been a little futuristic, but today the future is kind of already here. And whether it's Assemble, whether it's BIM 360, whether it's Revit, embrace these technologies, embrace BIM, and definitely take a look at how you're thinking about these jobs, because we look at it in every other industry. Technology has really driven us forward, and construction needs to embrace that as well. But really appreciate everybody's time here. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Buildings Week, and hopefully we'll talk to you guys soon.